Hey everyone, we're going to look at relations and functions today. So we're going to start out talking about domain and range, and our domain is going to be any possible value for our x's or our independent variable. And then also we're going to talk about range, which is our possible y values or the dependent variable. So when you have a domain and range, you have an independent variable, you have a dependent variable. We also like to call those inputs and outputs. So you have an input and an output, which allows us to have a relation. And a relation is any time you pair an input and an output, or pair a domain value and a range value. So since we know domain corresponds to x and range corresponds to y, that relation, when we pair them up, gives us that x comma y coordinate point that we talked about the other day. So knowing that domain is x, range is y, we can look at this example. This is a relation. We've paired x's and y's together, and we can state the domain and the range of this relation. Well, when we go to state our domain, it needs to be in curly brackets. And our domain are all of the x values. So I'm looking at my coordinate points, and remember the first number is always the x value. We go in increasing order. So our smallest number will be first, -3, and then we go 1, 2, and 4. Again, in curly brackets. Then we list our range. Well, we said range was y values. So here we have two 5s. I don't need to write both 5s. It's just repetitive and unnecessary. So our range is 1, 5, and 6, also in curly brackets. So we said a relation is when we pair x's and y's. We can more specifically define a function. A function is a relation, but every domain value has exactly one range value, which means our x values can't repeat. So here we're going to see, is this table a relation or a function? So we have a bunch of x's paired with a bunch of y's, so we know it's a relation. We have to decide, is it a function also or not? Well, we're looking. Is every x value paired to one y value? Well, here I have x equals 3 two different times, but they have two different y values. So therefore, this is a relation because this x value repeats. Okay, we said x cannot repeat in a function, and here it repeats. So next, and then I stated that, no, the x value repeats. I want you guys to tell me, are these ordered pairs a function? And then tell me why or why not. All right, sometimes though we're going to be given a graph and we have to decide, is this a function? Well, I don't know all the points that helped create this graph, so I can't just look to see if my x is repeated in my table. So we introduced something called the vertical line test. And the vertical line test is a really easy way to test whether this is going to be a function. So we're going to sketch a vertical line, remember that goes up and down, on top of the graph that's given to us. If that vertical line only touches our graph one time, then it is a function. However, if it touches the graph two or more times, then it's not a function, because that would indicate that our x values have repeated and they have different y values. So we're going to quickly look at a couple examples. Here is our first example. This is what we call a parabola. If you look very carefully, I have sketched in multiple vertical lines. There's 4 different vertical lines in there. And every single one of those vertical lines only touches my graph once. So since each line only crosses the graph one time, it passes the vertical line test, which means it is a function. If we look at this, supposed to be circles turned oval, here I drew my vertical lines in again, but now one vertical line hits 2 times. So it fails the vertical line test, so it is not a function. Okay, finally, if we look at an equation, we'll be occasionally asked to write an equation in function form. So in function form, that means we need to get the y by itself. So we're just going to solve for our y variable or our dependent variable. So we'd start by subtracting x. That gives us 2y equals 5 minus x, and then we divide by 2. to get y equals 5 halves minus 1 half x.